we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. Arlen Hamilton.
Yes. Hi.
Can I tell you, I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Oh, thank you.
I've been stalking you, low-key, before
okay.
this. I don't want to startle you, but I've been all over you.
That's who that was. Okay.
You have one of the most beautiful stories I have come across. I think we hear a lot about stories of overcoming, the underdog, and we love to hear it, but we barely hear the intricacies of what it really took to get here.
Yes.
Once it gets really colorful, all we know is, from homeless to
Exactly.
founder and managing partner. So I want to go all the way to the beginning.
Okay.
Run me back to the first night you realized, okay, hold on, I'm homeless tonight.
Oh, well, because that happened throughout a large part of my life, I don't know if I remember the very first time. And because it was so varied, that could mean I just don't have an address and I'm crashing on couches. In my 20s, that's what that was. It's kind of fun or a little eccentric in your 20s. But then in my 30s, in the last kind of stretch, it was I had slept on the couch of a good friend for far too long. I had just had an incredibly painful breakup. Mm-hmm. And so I was moved back to LA. And I just didn't have anywhere to stay. So I remember I was at if we're gonna get very specific, I was at the ArcLight in Hollywood, and I just sat outside of it. And then I sat outside of it, and then I sat outside of it, and I was like, I know there's a way I'm gonna be sleeping somewhere tonight. I know there's no way I'm gonna be out on the street right now. And I've been there many times before, but as a guest, as a customer.
Right.
And this time I could not afford to go in. And I just sat outside of it because it was familiar. It was someplace I knew. And I kind of came to terms with the understanding that I would not have a place to sleep that night. After a while, I was in denial for a while.
Right, how do you come to terms with it?
Things weren't coming together. Usually something would come together, or I would know something by then.
Because you had tried what?
Reaching out to people, one of the things I used to do, my mother, who was in a different state at the time, and my aunt, who was in a third state, they would get together and push $5 here, $10 here on any card they could find, and kind of push it together so I could have something that I could work with. Mm-hmm. And just nothing was working out because we were all struggling, and just nothing was working out. And I had already spent a lot of time on people's couches up until that point and during that time. So it was time to be on my own. And I figured out I'm not gonna have a place to sleep that night. And I had my luggage, like one roller, and I think I had a backpack. And I just started walking down, probably half a mile to a mile in either direction, and finding myself. So I ended up finding myself in a donut shop. Saw a lot of police and prostitutes and police officers. It was a good time, and just spent the whole evening and night at this place because you could buy something for $1 and sit there all day.
Right. In your book, you say you bought a donut for $1.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, because it was, my whole thing was, when people think about homelessness, it has different forms, many different forms. Mm-hmm. And please know that many people around us are homeless. We don't even realize it. But my thing was, I'm never going to sleep on the concrete ground. Because I think, not just because it would be uncomfortable and dangerous and all of that, but I thought if I ever get to that point, I don't think I come back from it, mentally and emotionally. It was that to the edge. That was kind of my boundary of what I could get past.
And how do you build that boundary? What thought even gets you to the point of thinking, I'll do it all, but not the ground?
Well, just the I've always had an imagination, you know, vivid imagination, and I just knew and know myself pretty well, and I knew that I could, you know, the day would come again, the dawn would come again, so I would have the new day to kind of make something of myself. But imagining myself out there, because I had been, you know, walking and seeing what was out, and just knowing that, you know, putting myself into a certain danger, putting myself, or having myself be in a certain danger or a certain element, I just felt like that would mean that I would turn into a slightly different person, because you have to have these survival skills in a different way, right? And so the image of that happening, I knew, okay, there would be things that I would have to start changing some of my ideals in order to survive something like that. I think about the same thing with jail and prison. I know that if I were in that situation, I could handle it, but I would be a different version of myself handling it.
Yeah. Now, there's a part in your book where you talk about the night you found yourself sleeping on the floor in the San Francisco airport, and how you repeatedly said to yourself, you are a venture capitalist, you are a venture capitalist, you are a venture capitalist.
Yeah.
In that moment you're saying those words, do you believe them, or are they an escape of sorts to you?
Yeah, I wasn't being delusional, and I wasn't trying to pretend I was something that I wasn't. What I was saying was, I was being in order to become. Like I was stepping into what I knew my destiny was, if that makes sense. Like I was saying, you know, your circumstances, everything around you, your circumstances are separate from who you are. And in that moment and at that time, what I wanted to be was a venture capitalist catalyzing other people. And it's almost like, you know, Beyonce says she turns into Sasha Fierce to go on stage. It's a part of her. It's not something she's pretending to be. She's not putting a costume on. She's just kind of settling in and grounding herself in that.
I can totally understand that, because, you know, I was born and raised in South Africa, and there's something about that living in the world you're going to live in before you get there, and asserting that for yourself. So you talk about the donut story, how you bought a $1 donut to make sure you could stay in this donut store for the night. Then you also talk about taking the stems off of grapes to be able to afford buying the actual grapes. There's a duality in living in that poverty, right? Where you want to be one thing, but you're experiencing another. How do you come to terms with that duality? I almost think about it as the times where I go back home and I visit South Africa, my grandmother. I have to shrink in that space and become something different. And then you get into rooms where you're talking to people with lots of money. How do you come to terms with that duality? How do you balance it?
For me personally, I feel exactly the same in both rooms. Exactly the same. Because I was always, to people, I was always a little bit off the beaten path. You know, I was a little bit like, I don't know what to make of her. She has these wild dreams and ambitions and does these things that seem so risky, you know? And in the rooms where I'm with the rich and the powerful, first of all, I became that, and, you know, that helps. And then second of all, not thinking they're any better than anybody else I'm talking to, because they are not. And so I've just been preparing for this moment my whole life, and, you know, I felt like I was, I guess, destined for it. I don't know if that's the word, but I do feel like I'm not overwhelmed by it, you know? And I feel like every room is where I'm supposed to be. And I feel that for other people as well. Every room that we're in, we're supposed to be there. And I hope I don't shrink myself these days, you know, but that takes a little time.
It does.
You know? Yeah, it takes time. I'm in my early 40s, and I think in my mid-20s, I would have had a different opinion.
Yeah. So before homelessness, or at some point before homelessness, you talk about, how it came in waves. There were different times of it. There was a time you were a production coordinator. You were, working with the likes of like CeeLo Green, Tony Braxton. What is the contrast in that life? Who were you then that you are not today?
Well, again, I feel like I'm the same. I feel like I'm the same because when I think about that, I think about knowing what my role was, knowing what my leverage was and was not, being aware of all of that. And I do the same thing here, I just have a different role.
What would you say is the difference then? Because, there's an arc in your story where we all go through those different pockets of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But there's a place where you gained your power.
Yeah.
And what is the difference between that place and any other place you were before?
Back then, what I would do, and I've done this since I was 15 when I started working at a pizza place, is I treated my experience at work as my training ground for what I wanted to become. So that to me there's a through line, and there's definitely a difference, I have been an assistant to people most of my life up until recently. And I've had a very specific voice. I have this much voice in the room, if any. But at the same time, keeping my ears open and observing is that through line to getting to where I am now. So I think I'm the same person in that room, getting an item for Tony Braxton, if she needed some sort of cup, was the wrong cup or something, I'm going to go and get that cup and make sure she has what she needs, because in that time, in that moment, I want to be the best version of Tony Braxton's production coordinator that there is.
The persistence is the same.
Yes, the persistence and the thought of quality and the thought of consistency and the thought of respect for the job, all of that is exactly the same.
Now, in your journey, or the hardest parts of your journey, right, you have very affirmative moments. There's a part of you that already knows this is not the end for you, or this is not where you stay, this is not what becomes of your life. Can you remember any particular day where that was the turning point, where you felt like, okay, now I can see it? I can see it now.
Yeah, it really didn't happen for this, I've had a few lives, so it really didn't happen until that day in September of 2015, where an angel investor sent me a message that said she was in to Backstage Capital. And up until that point, it was all like, what's going to happen? It was day to day. I don't know, how long will this last? I had been living at the airport, sleeping at the airport for a while before then, and it was, I didn't know what was going to happen day to day. And that text, it was in a text originally, and that text changed kind of the whole trajectory of my life.
Okay, so you talk about that one person who believed in it all, right? We all wish for that one person. We all sit here dreaming and wishing, especially if you're very clear on what you want to do and you're just like, God, just give me that one yes, okay? For you, it was Susan Kimberlin, right?
Yes.
An angel investor who gave you the text message, sent you the text message saying, I'm in. What did that mean to you, number one? And number two, what was different about her compared to all the other people that you had gone door to door to door to door asking?
Yeah, Susan was very special. We just sent a text to each other today, so we still talk after all these years. She was the first person to not only say yes, but wire that money into the account and make it real. It meant everything. It still does. It's why 6 years later, I will reach out to her any chance I get to thank her or to tell her something very cool that's happened at Backstage, because she started this with me. And she says I give her too much credit, but she doesn't realize. She doesn't realize that, especially because I was in a situation where I was day to day, didn't know where I was going to sleep, didn't have food half the time. She gave me that ability to kick off, but she also gave me that confidence. And I had always said, if I get one investor, it's over. I will take it from there. That's all I need. And she was that kickoff point. And I think what was different is a few months prior to her saying yes, she had said yes already. And she didn't end up investing because I didn't have a bank account.
Right.
And I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't have a business bank account. Like I said, things happen. I was well into my 30s at that point, but I didn't realize I needed to have a business bank account.
Yeah.
But after that happened, she stuck around, I stuck around. And I started giving her information, bits of information about companies that she was looking at. So she was an angel investor starting out. She was looking at companies herself. And because I had been training myself for years at this point to analyze companies, to understand companies, to source them, and start startups, I was able to give her information that she didn't have and insights that she didn't have. That's what I call being money, right? Didn't have it, so I became it. So even with all the money in her bank account, she didn't have certain insights that I would have about the companies or her thesis or things like that, and I became very valuable to her. So when it came time for her to make this final decision, it was easier for her to do.
You had no bank account. We talk about that, right? You're approaching all these investors and you're like, hey, come on. You don't have a bank account.
Well, let me, I had a bank account.
Okay, not a business
It
account.
was my mom's.
Okay. Same.
I was like, I thought I was so, you couldn't tell me anything. I was just like, okay, here's the routing number.
Right.
Let's get this party started.
Right.
No.
Okay, so you're in this like cutthroat business with no bank account, your mom's bank account. You had one, your mom's, okay. You didn't go to college either, right?
No.
And you're in this race with people who are in leagues competing which school they went to and who went to this Ivy League and who went to this blah, blah, blah. How do you take what you have or the lack thereof and make it match what is needed to make it in that space?
Yeah, well, I broke down what that was.
Yeah.
If someone went to college, for instance, they had education, but they also had a built-in network that they were able to start fostering. And that was what really was driving Silicon Valley and the world beyond that I was trying to break into. So I said, well, how can I mimic what they have? You know, I did, at the time, I didn't go to college. I was accepted to college. I was, a gifted student, all of that, but my family was at home struggling and I didn't want to leave them behind at the time, right? So I knew I could go toe-to-toe with these people who had been at these colleges.
Yes.
Any day of the week, put me next to them.
Come on.
But I was saying, what else do they have that maybe I don't have? Maybe experiences that they've had that I haven't. But let me see if I can find a way to not mimic it, but to be on par and beyond. And so what I soon found out was trying to be on par with them was setting low expectations for myself and low milestones. Because, just like money doesn't buy class, class, I guess, doesn't buy wisdom and insights. It buys an education. And so when you're in these schools, and today, I should mention my mother and I have scholarships to colleges, so we value education. When you're in these schools, it's about more than just trying to make a good grade. It's about more than just that. It's about crafting the person you're going to become, in any environment, in the education environment.
What was the biggest gap? You talk about you try to do so many things to be on par. What were some of those things? What are the gaps where you're like, oh God, I guess I have to wake up and do what? Yeah,
one of them was just like the sheer access and network. When I speak about this, I'm talking about MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, et cetera, that a lot of these people I was going toe-to-toe with would have come out of. So a lot of it was network from those schools and also from maybe their families in a lot of cases, not every case, but sometimes their families. And I remember there was this guy, he was a white guy, he was younger than I was at the time, I mean, always, he was younger than I was. And he had made a lot of press because he had built a $5 million fund from scratch, and they were calling him like the hustler, he had so much grit and determination. And so I was like, oh, that's me. Okay, well, I should learn about him. We should talk. So I researched this guy, and it turns out that 14 of his dad's friends had written checks to him.
Oh, why did I know it was going in this direction?
14. I remember that number very vividly. 14. And I'm sitting there, you know, at the donut shop, like, okay. And I just remember thinking, this is what they consider hustle and grind in Silicon Valley.
Self-made.
Oh, here we go. Like, let them see me, right? So I even called this guy, and I don't particularly like him, so I don't mind talking about him. I called him, and I was like, okay, let me make friends with him and see if there's something I can learn from. You can learn from everybody. Mm-hmm. And he let me know he didn't have time for me. He said the words, he doesn't have time for me. Today he is facing financial and hard time, I think, for fraud. Truly, and he's also like been banished from Silicon Valley for doing all kinds of ridiculous things. Mm-hmm. So I don't have time for him, you know, these days. But it is. So
the wheel turns.
So what if mm-hmm. I had said he has more education than I have, like traditional education than I have. He has more money. He has more connections and resources. I don't stand a chance. I'm just going to bow out. What if I'd done that? Would not be here, certainly. And, you know,
what made you not?
What made me not?
What made you not? I mean, you could have easily, a long time ago, have been like, I'm way out of my league. What makes you not?
He didn't, and most people just don't intimidate me. Like, I just knew that what I was building was right. I knew it needed to exist, and I knew that I had a certain lived experience and my access wasn't this rich person or that rich person. My access was like, I'm looking at this, right? My access was like these founders building amazing things who were themselves being overlooked and discounted. And I started doing all this beautiful mind math in my head and saying, man, if like one of us is gonna have a hard time out here, but what if we get everybody together and we build something that the world has never seen and Silicon Valley has never seen, then we are, even though we're David versus Goliath, we're on the board. And all I need is a little bit of time and my own conviction, and you know, the rest will be history. Now, I didn't know how long this was gonna take. I didn't know what it would take to get people convinced, and I didn't know the exact path. But I knew that I needed to exist.
Right, so you just pointed at this, and
yes.
I was telling you earlier on, I was on your Twitter during my stalking.
Yes. We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. But I see so many people tweeting you in gratitude and just like thanking Backstage Capital for everything that you've done for them. And, you know, so you talk about people like this guy who had 14 friends and family backing them from the beginning. And in your book, you reference how you realized that was the trend. That's where everybody started, right?
Yeah.
And in turn, you started becoming that initial friends and family list for other people.
That's right.
Tell me how you even come to that decision. You say, I realize this is what other people needed, and I want to be it. How? What is the day? What is the brainstorm session? I want all the deeds, all the tea.
Yeah, a lot of it was just ear and just, early stages. But I experienced this. I experienced that I was finding my way into the right phone calls and the right emails because of sheer determination. But once I got there, the people in those rooms, the people on the other side of that call were not even, they weren't well equipped themselves to understand me or the people that I was looking to back. And so I said, well, we can't skip steps here, because what I was originally thinking was, we'll skip a step in, as long as these investors, these white male investors, if they only knew about all this deal flow, if they only knew about this potential, of course they would throw money at it. And I realized that's not reality because I had these conversations. So I said, let's go back a step and let's get ourselves on the board. And if what it takes, you take the combined tenacity, grit, talent, moonshot thinking, vision of these founders that I was working with, and you take, okay, what's the, I guess, minimal viable product, right? What's the thing that will get them the next major step? Maybe it's not $1 million, but could it be 25,000? And usually what would happen is you'd go around and ask your friends and family for $25,000. And that I just didn't have that lived experience.
Where?
I didn't have that lived experience. So I said, well, I'll go around asking for the money to hand and invest into the companies. Because if we left out Backstage as the middle person, this person on the line with me is not getting me. I know they're not going to get the next person. So it was just a strategic measure that I think was needed, and we now know was needed, and it has turned into so much more from that. But it was like it did, most of this stems from, I see a place where something doesn't exist, and I want to create it.
That gap of opportunity.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. Okay, why not? Let's study that. Okay, this is what has been tried before. This is what has worked. This is what has not worked. And this is what I'm willing to do.
Yeah.
So why not?
I know some people who are watching might wonder, oh, okay, well, I mean, you had all this information. Where'd you get all this information from? You were going to libraries even while you were homeless, right?
Yeah.
And reading books. I mean, I think I've seen in my life maybe one person where I'm like, oh, this is a homeless person reading a book, and people sometimes, we forget that even a person without has a yearning.
Sure, and like I said before, people who are homeless, it's not just the one image that we know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who live out of their cars. Yeah. There are a lot of people who live out of a hotel or live out of their bouncing around friend to friend. And these are learned people already that circumstances have taken over. So it's not like they forgot how to read. There are several cases, of course, of people who are illiterate, but being illiterate doesn't, like you just said, doesn't stop you from wanting to yearn for education. Right. So I was in the place where I could certainly read, and there were libraries there for a reason. I also would walk into bookstores and just, they have those little couches and those little chairs for a reason, so I would be there. I don't think they wanted me there that long in the day, but I wasn't about to go and buy something that could be used for food, so I would sit there and I'd read as much as I could.
As we speak, Backstage Capital has raised probably over $15 million.
Yeah, more than that.
Invested in over 170, maybe over 200.
Yeah, getting close to the 200.
Yeah. And your 6-year anniversary was what, 2 days ago?
Yeah, it happened very recently.
Yeah, you're in that 6-year mark. How does it feel? How do you take it in?
It's very bifurcated. Half of it is, what? Like how, where am I? What am I doing? And the other half is, this is where I was meant to be. This feels exactly like home. In fact, in some ways, the first 35 years of my life feel more foreign to me, not because they're distant and they're not me, but because I was yearning for this for that long. This is where I get to have my voice heard today in a way that I have wanted since I was probably 5 years old.
Yeah. Well, 35 years is a long time to yearn for something.
Yes.
Right? 35 years is a long time to live, especially in as much hardship as you experienced. We spoke briefly about some of the disappointments you've experienced along the journey. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your deepest disappointments where you really felt, my God?
Yeah, well, there had been plenty my whole life, and great things my whole life. In the last few years, even after Susan put that first money in, and even after raising all these millions of dollars, between the yeses have been many more no's than yeses, and some of them have been quite defeating. And when those happen, it's usually a larger amount. It usually means that I was counting on it, or I thought that it was going to happen. It seemed like it was going in the right direction, and then there was a surprise that turned it to the right. I remember a couple that were just like devastating. One was one is just like kind of normal business, and one was just like out of a TV show. The first one was we were going to be invested in by two billionaires who were for the first time going to get together and invest in Backstage infrastructure. And it was after several years of us being in business, and we had 2 months of flying back and forth to each other's cities, and all the team was involved, and it was looking really good. And as I was getting ready to go on stage and speak in front of like 3,000 people, I had landed at the airport, same airport, by the way, that I slept in, but this time on first class and walking out with my driver waiting for me.
Come on, somebody!
As I'm waiting for my luggage, I get a phone call, and I think it's a phone call of like, hey, we'll see you soon. You're going to come speak, and we'll see you there because we're speaking there too. And it's one of the people, and it's not it's one of the representatives, and they said, sorry to tell you this, but they've decided they're not going to do any amount, not a penny. And they didn't tell me why. They didn't give me any notice. It was like, maybe $2 or $3 million with a promise for more was gone. And there was no recourse because they held all the cards at that time. And I was just there, and the first thing I thought was these companies that this money was going to go into backing, that's all a house of cards. It's just fallen. And that was just devastating because, that money wasn't going to go to me. It was going to go to them. And then the second one, we were going to get $5 million from this company that was like doing something really innovative. And I remember we had a meeting about it with all of our team and all of their executive team. And in the meeting, there were tears from their side and our side, and we were hugging, and it was like, this is going to change everything. And I mean, there's these grown men who were just weeping because they were so excited about this new initiative, and it was going to be more than $5 million just to start. And at the time, that was even more impactful for us than it even would be today. And the only thing that was left was I was supposed to have like kind of FaceTime photo op with the check, kind of with the main guy who runs everything. He was going to be in town in 3 weeks, and I was to fly back and go and have that moment with him because he lived overseas. And so we were just so excited. We were getting the legal stuff together. It was getting all ready for it. And I didn't make any announcements, of course, because I was ready for that. I knew a little bit, wait for that check to clear. 2 weeks, so not 3 weeks, but 2 weeks later, I wake up in New York City. Now, this was on the West Coast. I wake up in New York City. I still remember waking up in this hotel. And I check Twitter, because, that's where I get my news. I check the trending. This man I was supposed to have this photo op with is number 3 trending, has just been arrested for fraud and is an international fugitive, or was an international fugitive. And his company was legit, but he wasn't. And so, being me, I call up the executives, and I say, so we still good?
So I know he's trending and stuff, good, and right? I know he's cuffed right now, but...
Yeah, and I knew, of course, as soon as you couldn't have scripted it better, or worse. And so I called him, and the guy, I could just hear, I knew he had no blood in his face, right? I could just hear this executive who's like one of his right hand, and he's like, there's a lot that we're figuring out right now, so I have to go. And I'm like, okay. And I never talked to them again. I've never talked to them again. It's just gone on. Now this person is well known, and there's a news story about it, about him. I say his name. Y'all can cut it out if you want, but it's Carlos Ghosn, who escaped in a freight, like he escaped prison overseas to go to a different country where he lives, and I think he's still on the run. So we didn't get a photo op, in case you're wondering.
Okay, no, 'cause I was really curious if that picture happened. No, of course.
Incredible, right? So, although I certainly find the humor in it, because I like that kind of thing. If I were observing it, I would think it was hilarious. At the time, that was going to be our infrastructure capital. That was going to set us up for years, because it was going to lead to more, and we're going to be under the arm of this and that, and innovate. We're going to start an innovation lab at their company, and I don't talk about it too much, because it's just so, like, what do you do? What do you do that day? Calling my team and saying, yeah, that dude that we're supposed to meet in a week, he's arrested, and like they're holding all of his assets, and so it's over. People think I'm kidding. They think, because I'm a joker, right? They think I was like making something up.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm not that good.
So it's safe to say you have faced adversity both in your life before, what has become of you now, and you continue to face some in present day. Like,
Sure.
Some of those disappointments don't quite, it's never perfect, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I guess I would ask what the greatest lesson has been in those difficulties.
Well, I always heard it. I don't know if I believed it, but it really is the old adage that money does not equal or buy happiness, right? I don't think money buys happiness. The thing I have learned, though, is that it can rent you some happiness. Like, it can rent you moments of happiness, and everything else you have to make up for as a person. So I've had moments when I was the poorest I've been, but, moments of joy. And I've had moments where I have more resources and have been absolutely felt alone and felt hopeless and all of that at the same time. So going back to that core of who you are, what you believe in, and what you're willing to do to get what you want.
I love that. We're here today on this purple couch, your favorite.
You mean my purple couch?
Your purple couch. Our purple couches that we're taking home.
Yes. It's ours.
Courtesy of the Assemble team.
Yes.
What has been the joy of you working with this team? How did you get involved with Assemble?
Yeah, I was introduced to Assemble by another founder, and that happens a lot now, right? And I just love the premise of what they were going to be doing, what they were working on, everything behind it, like having these in-depth conversations and really get into how, why, where, and when. And I knew immediately that there was something missing there. You said that there's gaps of opportunity, right? There was something missing in market that was not speaking, we weren't being spoken to, we can be whatever that means to you, weren't being spoken to directly. We were an afterthought. We were in the peripheral. That's not a word that I say very easily. But we're not being directly spoken to. And I've had all sorts of an education, right? I've been in those gifted rooms. I've been in the looked down because I didn't go to college, even if somebody doesn't know everything about me, right? I've been so fortunate to have a scholarship with my mother, Mrs. Sims, where we have a scholarship at Oxford and at Dillard University, HBCU, and we're putting a pilot through her license and all sorts of things. And so I've had these bits and pieces of education, knowing that not everybody's going to follow the exact same path, and that it really is about curating that for yourself. So I thought all those elements were going to really set this company up for success, and the team that's back, that's spearheading it, I think is incredibly strong. I back them 100 times. And, Courtney, Cortez, Jesse, everybody who's involved, down to the people working on sets, down to the people who are producing, building these modules. I just think it's very strong. And, you see a lot of people popping up everywhere, but I know where I'm betting.
Yeah. I love that. You've done so much. I mean, you've had a full life. A full life,
Yes.
right? I mean, you've your company is more than successful. You've touched so many lives. I'm sure you plan to touch even more. At this point, can you even dream a bigger dream? What is next? What could you possibly do next?
Oh, I have so many more dreams. So
Tell
many
me.
more. I'm just getting started.
Come on.
I mean, well, I want to, if you're learning something today at Assemble, I want you to be able to take those skills, and I want to help you find your passion, your job, something that helps sustain you financially. So I've launched a new company called Runner. That company matches operational talent to startups and other types of companies that are inclusive out the gate. And my big vision for that is I want to match thousands and thousands of people who otherwise would have trouble finding jobs or would find the wrong job for them, and match them with thousands of inclusive companies, because I know that they exist. And these companies are anywhere from 1 person to 30 people and 100 plus. So I want to make all types of matches there with Runner. I also am very happy to be teaching a brand new group of people, already in the hundreds, about investing, about what I did, how to go from scratch, and hopefully in a lot less time with a lot less heartache, because I have the blueprint for them. So I believe you do not have to be rich to be able to catalyze others with investment of your own resources and your own time, and that there is a way, there is an actual formula for doing so. So teaching is what's next, which I'm so glad to be doing here, and building companies. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Like, that's since I was in the 3rd grade with my first candy company, and ran the yard.
I love it. Yeah.
In the 3rd grade. I'm just not gonna stop. Like, that's as long as I can wake up every day with my eye on the prize of catalyzing others.
Yeah.
I'm going to be backing other funds, other emerging managers. I have 20 or so in my portfolio already, and it's just not going to stop.
If I was a student watching this right now and hearing every word you're saying, I'd be like, okay, how do I get involved in what she's doing?
Yeah.
Where do I go to find a scholarship that is an Arlen Hamilton scholarship? All of a sudden I want to go to an HBCU again. Like, where do I go? What is the direction that people go to join teams, hold hands, be in the same space as you?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time talking to people on social. So Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Arlen Was Here, ARLAN Was Here. And you can go to arlenwashere.com to kind of learn about a lot of things that I do, because that's the whole point. I want people to look at what I'm doing and say, this is where I fit. Mm-hmm. This is where I belong.
I love that. I think my greatest takeaway from you today, as one fellow survivor to the next, is prioritizing our dreams over our trauma. Because when I think of the line, what it's taken for you to get here today, to overcome not just the physical threats on your life as being a homeless woman, but the mental threats on your life in overcoming all of that, which we barely scratch the surface on what's the kind of trauma that you carry with you as you go from place to place to place, from person to person to person. So I commend you. I celebrate you.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And wish you continued success.
Thank you.
I've loved every moment of this.